Great to have you on this new episode of In the Spotlight. I'll give a short intro. Kari is the VP of Productivity and Readiness at Sysdig today. She's driving revenue enablement and value realization. Before that, you were VP of Rev Enablement at Talkdesk. You spent time in Cloudera, VMware, Oracle. I love the title, Productivity and Readiness, because I think that's the ultimate goal of what you're trying to drive and not just what you do when you wake up. So thanks for being with us, Kari. This is going to be a very interesting conversation.
Thanks so much for having me, Roy. I have watched the title trajectory of sales enablement, and then no, it's not just sales enablement, it's revenue enablement, it's the whole go-to-market to now this change. And I have peers moving into the title as they pursue different opportunities as well around productivity or readiness, because that is really, we're getting to the roots of what we do. So
100%. Maybe I'll throw a curveball just out of that title. Like, what is productivity for you?
So for me, it is, and I tell my team this all the time, we are driving revenue, because if we're doing our job properly, then our sellers should be able to, drive larger deals, drive expansion. So we are not separate from that. We roll up our sleeves. Our skin's in the game as well. I always want to be tied to that. So when a CRO says, I don't know how I'm going to make this 100 million number, I can always say, whoa, it's our 100 million number. Because we are responsible for helping to drive that productivity inside of a go-to-market organization.
Amazing. So let's dive into that a little bit. You've been in multiple companies in that productivity driver role. You're very active in that community. When you look at the challenges that your companies are facing today in the last few years, what are the top challenges in productivity that they're, other than obviously the ultimate KPIs that everybody's trying to get to, but what are the actual challenges of getting there today?
Yeah, so I think there is a lot, especially with AI coming onto the scene, right? And then in a more effective way that people are starting to leverage it. I think, at the end of the day, it's about qualifying deals. It sounds like the fundamental grassroots, but there's still challenges in that. I talk to my peers across the industry all the time, and the stories of the classic rep spends a lot of time chasing opportunities that aren't truly aligned with ICP and weren't well understood, and slows down the execution and often, causes friction later in the cycle. It's still a very common problem. And then, I think sellers in this new world have to learn a skill to be a guide. I think, in the old world, we would enter a customer conversation and think that the customer knew what they were wanting. And so we would approach that with pitching our product, right? And how we could solve that and the features and functionalities that came with that. And that's not really the right approach in today's world, when there are so many tools in B2B sales that someone could go with, and very, very good tools. People are looking for that guide to really help them understand what it is that they need, the value that they're going to get from that product. And then also, I think the confidence of the seller to be able to do that is an area that we're all trying, as the enablement teams, to drive that confidence. A lot of time, it's not just the pitch, right? Again, it's building that trust, but building a trust in a way that you're not saying, oh, I've got all the answers. Here they are, just listening to me. It's listening to the customer, understanding, what business problems they're really trying to solve first. And then again, sometimes not even pitching at that moment, right? Just really understanding and then coming back with, kind of the value that you can bring to the table. So I think, there's always been a focus on that, but the need in this B2B world is much different than it once was.
So why is creating a guide out of the average rep and teaching them how to listen for what you're describing? Why is it so difficult? Where are the blockers there?
So I think, think about an SCR that is focused on pure volume, right? Like there's trying to have as many conversations, right? And then when they move into that first commercial, that first commercial role, it's like shifting, right? I don't need to get the volume, I need to go deeper. And sometimes, there's great enablement programs that kind of bridge, that gap from the roles that people can move into as they climb and grow over time, their career. But I think, sometimes, again, just the old school ways and methodologies that we were taught to, here's your first call deck, come in, here's your talk track. Hopefully, you did a little bit of research on the company ahead of time. But I think a lot of times what happens is people get stuck at a practitioner level that understand the problem that they're trying to solve. And it's harder then to move up inside of the organization to get the buy-in from the economic buyer. And so I think a lot of times sellers get stuck right there. They're like, oh man, my champion gets it. I'm listening to them and they're in agreement with, my solution that this would be great for their company. But it's the guiding part comes in then helping them build champions internally inside with the other stakeholders, and build trust and confidence in those stakeholders that, your product, your solution is the right one for the business, and build that confidence not just in the seller, but then also, in the customer.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And you touched on the pitch versus listen.
Mhm.
And in a way, we're bound to fall into this problem because when a new rep comes in, they don't know anything about our company. And
Mhm.
so the way to learn about the company is to learn a pitch of the value proposition of what we do, the problems we solve. That's the way for them to internalize what we do as a company. But then what they go do is they go pitch. They don't go listen, right? And so in a way, they need to learn that pitch, but then they need to throw it away
Mhm.
and then try to understand how to listen before they sprinkle pieces of that pitch where it's needed, which is very hard. And you also spoke about volume. People are constantly driven to operate the deals, operate the progress of the deals. They forget that it's all about solving the problem of the person in front of them. It's
Yes.
not like we want to progress the deal to the next stage, but the person in front of us might not be ready yet. We need to do some work in order for them to get there. So 100%, I agree fully. So let's talk about the tools. You said there's a lot of good tools out there. AI obviously is now leading every conversation in tooling. And we all, I think many of us saw the study that 95% of AI initiatives are failing. And it doesn't surprise me because the amount of hype around AI is huge. I personally spoke to a RevOps leader that told me that right off the bat when I started the conversation, I'm really sorry. Everything you're going to tell me, I'm not going to believe because of all the things I'm being pitched. I need to see things and understand how it's working. Otherwise, I'm not going to believe it. The amount of hype versus real value coming from go-to-market AI is that gap probably has never been bigger in terms of hypes. And so how do you clear the BS and the noise and focus really on where the value is when you evaluate, but also when you implement?
So there's definitely no shortage of AI hype, especially from a go-to-market tooling perspective right now, right? So I think the way you clear through the noise is by starting with the problem. What problem are we trying to solve? And then also, what's the impact that that's going to have on, business outcomes, on your victory plan? And then that, to me, is the way to focus on the vital few versus the trivial many. Because what's happening now, and I see it all throughout my workday, but then I also see it at night at home as well as, everyone is hearing about from a friend how they're leveraging AI or a coworker. And everyone's like, have you done this yet? Have you tried this? Right. But then that doesn't really drive scale and consistency to be able to have a measurable outcome because everyone's just kind of running around frantically trying things out. And I think that's why you're seeing so much noise, not the real true, the value of being able to be tracked from the use of AI. And so I think companies that are doing it right are establishing an AI task force that can sort through and prioritize based on the company's goals and objectives to see which things are going to move the needle a little bit, more for the whole company, and then enabling across a go-to-market, across an entire company. I would say that I look at adoption signals, right? Does someone try things out a couple times and then never goes back to that? Tool requires a rep to fundamentally change their workflow or jump through hoops, the value will never be materialized. Real value in a go-to-market AI feature functionality comes when the technology quietly removes that admin work and gives better insights or helps reps spend more time selling. So those are really the focus areas that we focus on and can kind of cut through that noise, not just a flashy demo. There's some really great demos out there, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's cool, and all the ways that we could use that. But like, you have to honestly be honest with the skill set of your go-to-market, motion, to only adopt those that are really going, to move the needle. And again, we're all seeing a ton of AI demos. I think consolidation is going to be a huge thing. Like, we're now seeing tools that, they're, crossing into a different market in order to be the one size fits all tool in the sales cycle. And we're seeing that like on every side. And I always joke, I say every company is trying to figure out how they become an AI company first. And then in whatever suite that they kind of, play in. And so I think tool consolidation is on everyone's mind, but then in that, everyone's trying to figure out, okay, who's doing it best, right? And I think any company that's putting it in a way that can be leveraged in real time for a go-to-market is going to win that. And I think that because as an enablement leader, we have been trying to do real-time, just-in-time enablement for years. And I think we did the best that we could, and the tools evolved over time where you could have certain assets tagged in different places. But with AI, it is truly a game changer. We are finally going to be able to produce real-time enablement inside a workflow, and that's what's going to be game-changing.
Amazing. I think you nailed many points here. Prioritize your top problems and blockers before you go look for AI. Understand your workflow and see where it fits into the workflow, because anything that it breaks your workflow or changes it creates adoption barriers. And the third is you gave an example, which is just-in-time enablement. I think the world of enablement going back as a separate activity that's different from the day-to-day of the reps has been always challenging. And if we can inject AI into the existing workflow of people, then that's where the value comes from. So I couldn't agree more. AI solutions need to put as much effort and time into integrating to the workflow, to the tool set, to the engagement moments with the users, and not just the amazing AI result that they can bring. If you go into this interface and use it this way, then you're going to get these amazing results.
Yeah, and
100%.
I think one of the cool things that we're leveraging with Spotlight, Roy, that's a game changer, is being able to complete the sales qualification autonomously by just, listening to the gong calls or having the Spotlight recorder as well. To me, is an easy place to actually measure an outcome. Because that is the admin stuff. I remember we did a training session around how to drive quality medpick criteria. So like reps, instead of just entering something in a field, how to make sure what they're putting in is of quality that can be, leveraged later on. And it's like, that's no longer a problem. If you have a tool that can use AI to take from a call those very, good quality answers to those questions, and then just, with a brief glance over to make sure that you as a human heard the same thing, right? To me, it's things like that if go-to-market organizations will leverage consistently, you're going to have a very measurable outcome for that.
Amazing. I agree. And I think the data, or the quality of the data, as you said, and being able to bring evidence rather than, opinion-based data is key. So let's talk a little bit more about data and quality of data. Every RevOps team is looking at data hygiene. They have a data nightmare,
Yeah.
right? It's always the problem. Some of it is what you just outlined, which is human generated data, which is just not evidence. It's not true. Not because people are trying to put bad data. Sometimes they might, but that's not the main reason. The main reason is because we're human, we're optimistic, and we want to satisfy the system, right? If our managers tell us to update the opportunities before the Monday morning meeting, we're going to go update the opportunities before the Monday morning.
Right.
And
Yeah.
something is going to get written in that text box, no matter what the progress was. And but is it valuable? No, not always. When you look at data hygiene, what
Mhm.
are the big problems with data hygiene that you see that are driving these kind of problems?
One of the most unglamorous but mission critical issues in a go-to-market. The people closest to the data today are the sellers. They don't see the immediate, value in maintaining it, and that leads to incomplete records, inconsistent activity logs, all the things that we know. With Spotlight, we've been able to tackle this, by automating as much as possible, pulling in data from the meeting so that reps don't have to manually enter every. The quality of that is increased because we can create what it's pulling from, what it hears. Automation alone is never enough. It requires that cultural shift, right? Reps need to see how clean data directly benefits them. And I think they realize that when they get the opportunity to present a business value assessment. And, Spotlight makes that so easy because as you're building out the sales qualification information, it's starting to build that business value assessment. And then, it's a pretty low lift then when a seller needs to go that next step to, finish building out the assessment and customize that assessment. And I think when they see that, like, it's not like, oh, I'm just, doing this for a forecasting call, but I'm building something that I'm going to be able to share with the customer for them to then go internally, shop around, get buy-in, get it in front of, again, all the stakeholders cross-functionally. One more step onto that is if you're leveraging digital sales rooms and you can put that business brief or that business value assessment inside a digital sales room, then it works for the seller and that they can see who that's being shared with. And they know, they can go do the research to see, what that C-suite, is gold upon and what, business objectives that they're trying to drive and are responsible for. Well, AI makes that super easy today, right? We can go read 10Ks and earnings reports in seconds. And so I think it's a fun time to be a seller because you have all of these things working for you that you can pull together and have a much more meaningful conversation. Now, it's silly to not do the work to make sure that the data hygiene is good because then you're going to have to do extra work on the back end of that. When it's positioned that way and they see the benefits of that for the first time, it changes behavior because then it's like, oh, okay, like this is doing something for me.
And so that creates the right motivation. And maybe some teams also use that motivation to drive, I think, healthy behavior, which is if there is no update, we're better off with an empty data set than a bad data set.
Yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
okay because we want the data to be credible so that you can get the benefits that we're driving. So we don't just need updates for the sake of updates. All right, so let's we talked a lot about bottoms up and how AI is helping the rep. I want to touch on the top down for a second. So I personally know the management team that's working with you, amazing people, Gary Crandall, many people in the organization that are creating a top down alignment.
Mhm.
Top down alignment from the executives is, as we know, is key for any change that we want to drive. Where do you see in your history, in your previous companies, where top-down alignment was one of the key things versus where, sometimes it actually blocks the progress, even if the bottom up is built really well?
So I do think it's critical to have alignment. It's for accountability. There's one thing that, our sales leadership team, we talk about having agreements versus expectations. I think that is huge. And again, from what I said earlier, it has to map to the company success and the success plan, the victory plan, whatever it's called inside your organization, and then has to have the metrics to back up. And so when you have, the executive sponsorship, the executive leadership, it is critical to be examining the how that's moving the needle. Otherwise, people won't adopt, right? We've seen
Right.
that. And so it has, in this case, it has to be tops down. I think a lot of people are pulling AI tricks and tips from everywhere. And I think, again, you have to have that group that makes sure that whatever we're spending our time either training on, enabling on, or tools that we're investing in, again, maps to the success of the company. And, the executive staff is who, sets those goals and targets. And so, I think they need to be curious as to how, that what we're focused on is moving those needles. Operational efficiency, productivity gains. I mean, you need an AI task force. I really do think the companies that have an AI task force are getting ahead and being able to show the business outcomes of which specific AI functions that they're leveraging. I think, again, the accountability piece is huge. It creates, the momentum to drive real change and adoption when you have that. When it becomes part of the executive nomenclature in an all hands meeting or in a stand up, I think it just, again, changes the behavior of the whole organization. But again, you can't have that without the accountability piece. So, you got to have that as well. I don't know if you have read the new book, Frame Making Sale by Brent Adamson and Carl Schmidt. So they were co-authors of the Challenger Sale, and this new book that they just launched, I think a couple weeks ago, it reimagines everything in the new world of B2B with AI. And it really focuses on customer confidence and, turning sellers into those decision coaches. Well, the sellers have to also have coaches as well, right? So why not best like your executive staff is bought in, and this is the mission that we're all on, and this is how we're going to drive some operational efficiency, productivity gains across the way. And I think sometimes the things that we're teaching our sellers to focus on with customers, like we need to take that internally too and look at it, through that lens. And I do think, again, just the alignment that everyone is rowing in the same direction, walking in lockstep. That's really the only way you change a culture, you change behavior. And I think right now, like everyone's a little bit like sometimes frozen, sometimes overwhelmed, sometimes, because a lot is changing
Yeah.
when it comes to B2B sales right now.
Kari, amazing, amazing insights. You have a track record of designing and delivering these value-based enablement programs and turning them into real action. This is very useful. I want to thank you so much for spending the time. Hopefully, this has been useful for enablement teams, RevOps teams, as one of the first episodes that's focusing on these type of conversations and challenges. Thank you, Kari.
Thanks so much for having me, Roy.